Bill Cipher, or as I like to call him, William Cryptograph, is one of the most iconic villains of all time. At this point, he's probably more popular than the actual goddamn Illuminati. From his instantly recognizable design to his comedically deranged personality, Bill is forever engraved into the minds of all Gravity Falls enjoyers, some enjoying him a bit too much. He is so beloved and remembered that 7 years after his show has ended, the creator of Gravity Falls, Alex Hirsch, has announced the Book of Bill, an entire book allegedly written by the Dream Demon himself.
Now, I was super excited at the announcement of this book. More excited than I was at my damn graduation.
A chance to see into the mind of Bill Cipher? What Gravity Falls fan wouldn't be salivating at the thought? Out of everything that the book promises in its description, the main thing that caught my eyes was this. Bill sheds light on his bizarre origins. Now, that could literally mean anything. Hell, the chapter on Silly Straws is probably going to be longer than his origins. But it still made me really curious. How much do we actually know about Bill's origins? About the life and death of his home? About his family? So I went digging, looking for any and all kinds of niche or obscure Gravity Falls media I could find, in a way to sort of prep myself on Bill knowledge before his book comes out. Eventually, like any good researcher, I found myself on Reddit, reading through an AMA done by none other than Bill Cipher himself. And yes, this is official. This Ask Me Anything was done back in 2015, where fans of the show were able to ask the three-sided con artist whatever came to their minds in a pressured 30-minute time window. There's a lot of fun stuff here, from unhinged banter to life and financial advice. But yet again, something caught my eye. A user named ArchiveMod asked, "Do you know what spawned your existence?"
Edwin Abud has a decent idea.
Edwin Abud was a 19th century author, theologian, and schoolmaster. But what makes him relevant to this discussion is that he also wrote a book called Flatland, a romance of many dimensions. And down the rabbit hole we go.
Today I will be presenting to you a theory, or rather 3 theories, that can stand on their own or combine to make one mega theory. And just to be cute, I'll give each of them a little subtitle.
So first off, what the heck do we even know about Bill? His origins are elusive. He doesn't really bring up his past that much. But there is one major scene in the show that's been plaguing my mind for weeks.
Now that dumb baby's out of the way, time itself! But I wasn't always this way. You think those chains are tight? Imagine living in the second dimension. Flat minds in a flat world with flat dreams. I liberated my dimension, Stanford, and I'm here to liberate yours. There's just one...
In just this short clip, we get told a lot about Bill. His homeworld was quite literally flat, a 2-dimensional plane. He wasn't really a big fan of his home. In fact, he ended up destroying it. We can infer that he felt chained or restricted in his dimension, like if his 2D existence was gnawing at him. And that's pretty much all the info we get from the show. So is that all we've got to work with? No. Remember, this is Gravity Falls we're talking about. There is so much more hidden outside the show.
Like Journal 3, an official replica of the in-show book.
This thing is full of fun entries, lore, and codes. I definitely recommend you pick it up. One of the codes, written by Bill, doesn't tell us about his home, but does give us more insight to his mind.
I ask you, why should time only move forward? Why must cause precede effect? Who voted on the laws of physics? Rules are a perversion against all will. That's why I'm about to rewrite the whole system, buddy, and no one is going to stop me.
And yet another page entry reinforces the fact that he destroyed his dimension, noting that he even killed his own parents. So that's 2 more things to add to what we know about him. But the main thing I want to mention is on page... well, these pages aren't actually numbered, so it's this page. The 2-dimensional dimension. It talks about a flat world with shapes as the inhabitants. A flat world, you say? Now, to be clear, this isn't actually Bill's home. It's just mistaken for it. But I mean, how unique can a 2-dimensional world look? Even so, there's still a lot of interesting information to go over, which we will a little later. Because now, let me introduce you to a square. Look at him. Handsome feller, isn't he? This square is actually our protagonist in Flatland. Written in the perspective of our 2-dimensional friend here, Flatland explores the fundamental reality of dimensions and perspective. As the name suggests, the square's home is a completely flat 2D plane without any height or depth to it. There's a few illustrations to help us understand this concept, but remember, everything from the shape's perspective is just a straight black line. On top of that, it's also a satirical comedy on the hierarchy of social classes back in the Victorian times. The amount of sides you have as a shape determines your place in society, with triangles being some of the lower classes. And shapes with enough sides to resemble a circle pretty much lead the system. It's actually a pretty fun read in terms of world building, and eventually the square starts to engage with higher dimensional planes later down the line.
Okay, but what does any of this have to do with Gravity Falls or Bill Cipher? These are two completely different works from completely different eras, subjects, locations, and people. I mean, it's not like these two have anything in common, right?
Flat world.
Right? Oh.
Grab yourself a glass of cold interdimensional strawberry milk, because we are getting weird. Quick disclaimer before we get into it. Try to keep an open mind going forward. We're making a lot of assumptions here. Flatland is not exactly a reliable source. We don't know what Bill's world was actually like, what systems they used, or even how powerful any of them are. But we might be able to build a narrative and come to a satisfying conclusion. So don't take anything too seriously, it's all in good fun. But with that out of the way, I present to you... Obviously, Flatland isn't Bill's original home, nor does it demonstrate its ultimate destruction. But I think what this book can offer us are hints into what could have shaped Bill to be the triangular demon he is today. Like I mentioned, Flatland is kind of a parody of class systems, and it's surprisingly well thought out with the amount of sides you have corresponding with the amount of wisdom or intelligence you have, therefore determining your place in the hierarchy. And what shape has the least amount of sides? Triangles. They are often seen as some of the lowest class of soldiers and workers. They receive very little respect and are often only educated on how to do their work. It's honestly really sad to see how closely this mirrors real life, with the high-class circles having strict regulations to keep them in place and are constantly monitored to ensure any form of rebellion is crushed. But anyway, the main point is, triangles are considered low class, just like the entry in Journal 3. Again, I know this isn't Bill's actual dimension, but there are some very strong correlations between this and Flatland. Even the circles are high class. I just find it odd that both times triangles are represented as lowly. So what if Bill was a dirty, piss-stained, worthless burden to society? A greasy bum living in the slums. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but I'm glad it did. Because remember, Bill felt chained in his world, flat dreams and everything. He could be referring to dimensional restraints, but what if he's talking about a hierarchical class system suffocating him? An unwinnable game, a crushing sensation of societal norms that drove him insane and made him desperate for more power and destroyed his world. It's not a far-fetched thought, except there's one problem. Look at his appearance. Fancy. Doesn't scream lower class. Maybe it's his way of sticking it to the rich. Instead of putting on clown makeup, he puts on a top hat and bow tie as one final mockery to the caste system that he annihilated. I wouldn't put it past him. But there's one tiny thing I haven't mentioned. While isosceles triangles couldn't move up in the world, equilaterals could. Through a complicated process, equilateral triangles are granted access to a higher quality of life. So how do we figure out what kind of triangle Bill is? We could always pixel measure him, but I think we could do better. I know, let's pull out some more classic literature. This choose your own adventure book lets readers decide Dipper and Mabel's fate as they battle through time looking for treasure. Through a series of shenanigans, one route leads us to the Axolotl, an all-knowing godlike being that lets them ask a question. When Dipper asks about Bill, he replies with a poem. 60 degrees that come in threes. And there's our confirmation. 60 degrees that come in three. All three sides are equal. Bill is indeed an equilateral. And yeah, I know this book is non-canon, but Alex Hirsch said that a small thing in it is canon, and it's probably almost definitely with absolute certainty this. So what if instead of being a dirty peasant, Bill was able to rise through the ranks? Maybe he was a bit of a fancy pants, but he wanted more. He wanted to reach higher and higher. He got that dopamine flowing and he's hooked. And maybe his thirst for a higher class evolved into a thirst for power, a more physical power. And that's when he began to feel really trapped. Limited by the second dimension, he tried to break free and ended up burning his world. Let me reiterate, I know I'm making a lot of stretches for the narrative I want. We don't know the rules of his home. We don't know if they all had overpowered abilities like he did. But I like to think that the social system they had also revolved around the amount of magical powers they had, and that's why Bill wanted more. See, that's what makes this so fun. We could pick up on small details given to us and try to fill in the gaps. Case in point, Bill's parents. An odd detail I kept noticing popping up was Bill's relationship to his family. On 3 separate occasions, it's mentioned that he no longer has family or has killed them. It's weird. Like, I get it, he's a bad dude. Then I thought of how equilaterals are taken from their families and adopted by higher class citizens in Flatland. If Bill was taken from his family, that could add more weight to this whole dilemma, though admittedly, there's not much else to chew on here. Bill being adopted doesn't really add much to his story. I just thought I should mention it. Speaking of school, didn't you guys hate it when you weren't allowed to run down the hall? Or when you had to wait in a long line to get lunch? It was so boring, man, so restrictive. It's almost as if we take it for granted these days, but isn't it great how we are able to exist in a third dimensional plane? Imagine being only able to move forward and back. Imagine never being able to tell apart your wife from your pet fish. That's how it is in Flatland. I don't know if you guys noticed it while I was talking about it, but life in Flatland is horrendous. The author himself describes it as dull. There's nothing to do around here. There are full passages in this book describing how many hoops they have to jump through in order to recognize each other. Since everyone looks like a line in their perspective, the higher class needs to rely on a kind of fog in order to recognize the shading or quote-unquote depth of a shape. Or you could also feel up your companion, touch their sides to determine their shape. Want to add a little color in your life? Too bad. There is a whole ass law passed banning the use of color because of the oh so great circles don't want their special recognition technique to be undermined by color. So let's get rid of them to maintain our social standing. And let's not forget, they literally kill deformed babies in Flatland. If you're born an irregular shape, you are immediately purged so you don't curse the world with your horrific ugliness. Oh hey, another connection to Journal 3. You know, I could go on and on about how women are seen as lower than triangles since they are just a straight line, or how revolutions and revolts are slaughtered in order to maintain the hierarchy, but I think you guys get it by now. There are so many rules and laws in Flatland. How you're supposed to build your house, how you're supposed to move in order to avoid injury, how you're supposed to reproduce, and so on and so forth.
And as we all know, Bill hates rules. So for him to live in such a restraining world with even restrainier laws of nature itself, yeah, I can see why he calls them perversions of will.
And in an effort to break these rules, he might have accidentally broken the whole universe itself, causing the dimension to collapse in and on itself, killing everybody but the rule breaker, the one that got away. As to how he broke the universe is a little tricky. Maybe he broke some forbidden rule, like he went against the law of nature in his world and tried to move in a more 3D manner to escape the flat plane. I guess in my mind anyone would be able to do it, but they just don't, because then that would happen. Yeah, admittedly this is one of the weaker theories. It requires more shots in the dark. But all we really need to take away from here is that life in a 2-dimensional world sucks. It sucks bad. But would it really suck for someone who already exists there? They wouldn't know any better if that was just their existence. It's like when we sometimes think that, man, life in the 1950s must have sucked. No internet, no YouTube, no Twitter, or actually that's not much of a loss. They would need to have someone on a higher plane to explain it to them. They would need to be told this cursed knowledge. They would need to be in Flatland, the square gets paid a visit by a sphere, a third-dimensional being that opens his mind to a brand new reality. He chose the square so he can spread the knowledge to his fellow shapes. At first, the square is a little skeptical of these so-called other dimensions. But seeing is believing, and once he's able to see his world from another view, the spiral begins. So what if Bill was one of these chosen figures, or shapes? What if he saw worlds beyond his comprehension and completely drove him to madness? He saw how small and restricted his world truly was, and couldn't bear the fact that his existence was so pitiful compared to higher dimensional figures. In Flatland, the square doesn't quite go insane, but he does get overly ecstatic and hysterical about even higher dimensions. So the sphere forces him back home, and when he tries to spread the message, is imprisoned by the circles. If Bill was sent back, it's possible he could have destroyed it himself, or maybe he caused a domino effect that led to its destruction. Let me explain. In Flatland, the circle's imprisoning square was an act of selfishness. They didn't want this knowledge to disrupt the status quo that is their leadership. But what if in Bill's world there will be a better reason to lock him up? Bill spreads what he had learned, and slowly everyone else starts to have the same existential crisis that he did. Suddenly, the world is plunged into complete chaos. Everyone goes crazy and his dimension crumbles. Bill inadvertently caused his home's destructions. Going back to the Axolotl poem, he says, "Saw his dimension burn, misses home and can't return. Says he's happy, he's a liar. Blame the arson for the fire." This to me tells us that Bill wasn't quite fond of his world's destruction. It almost reads like it was some sort of accident, or maybe an act of blind impulsive rage that he later regretted. Perhaps after he had nothing left of his world, he embraced hedonism. He embraces the complete psychotic chaos tornado that he is. He embraces the weird.
So there you have it, Bill's origin story explained. Am I right? No, I am not. But it was fun trying to shove two completely different pieces from two different puzzles together.
So let's shove these three sides together to create one mega conspiracy. Bill is a low-class shape, trying to make his way through the flat world he calls home. Through rigorous rules and regulation, he slowly develops an extreme dislike towards any kind of restriction, but he's forced to follow along the circle's guidelines. Lucky for him, he's an equilateral, so he's able to, slowly but surely, move up from the slums to a higher class existence. But it's not enough for him. Eventually, there will be another limit to how high he can climb. He himself will never be a serp. This craving for something more, this craving for status and power starts to manifest in him. He wants more than life can give him, more than these rules let him have. But one day, he gets a visit from a higher being. He discovers entire universes and worlds, so when he comes back to his own, an unbearable thirst overtakes him. His yearning for status and power multiply. Suddenly, his world feels so tight. Everything is just too flat. Flat minds in a flat world with flat dreams. He can't take it anymore. He needs an escape. One thing leads to another, and soon he watches as his world is devoured by the void. Flatland isn't supposed to be the Bill Cipher Bible. That's not out till June. And him mentioning Edwin in the AMA was just a fun little nod to how he might have been conceptualized by Alex, and not a hint towards his lore. There will always be mysteries about him. Like cryptos. What the hell is up with cryptos? You'd think he'd be more important. He's a shape too. He's not from Bill's world, is he? Everyone is dead. Why is Bill hanging out with him? Squares are stupid, and he's kind of a square. I don't know, man. I guess it's just not that deep. It probably doesn't matter how he met him or his other cronies like 8-Ball or Teeth or Pyronica. Is it weird that I want to share a milkshake with her?
You know, there's been a lot of hints that Bill is gonna return one day. His backwards message connecting to the Axolotl is the most obvious one. But there's also been some other codes and small hints that he was gonna return one day. So tell me, am I the only person who thought that when this book was announced, this was Bill's grand return? I mean, the Axolotl did say that he would return in a different form and in a different time. Well, right now it's a different time, and a book is a different form. This has gotta be his grand return, right? But then again, using that logic, I guess you can also say that his little record performance was also his grand return. But hey, that's just a theory. Oh! Wait a minute. Oh.